Romantic comedy is one of those niches that is really addictive. Once customers start reading the books and the books make them laugh, it makes them cry, it makes them really want to find out what happens to the characters next. And Jami Albright is one of the best in the business at writing romantic comedy books. So it's fascinating to speak to her all about her marketing techniques, the importance of building a tribe and getting the right people around you. And obviously, Jami Albright is well embedded within the self-publishing industry. She's got her own podcast, and I had the chance to meet her in person recently. And it was amazing to meet her in person because she's exactly like she is on her podcast. Very chatty, very bubbly, really fun to be around. So this is a really interesting episode all about how you can market your romantic comedy books, how you can find that audience, how you can build your newsletter, what you do with that newsletter, and much, much more. Hi everybody, and welcome to the Publishing Performance Show. I'm here with Jami Albright, who's a romance comedy author from Texas. And she's also a podcaster at the Wish I'd Known podcast, which is a podcast all about writing for authors. Thanks for joining us, Jami.
You're welcome. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks. So she's all the way from Texas today. We've had quite a few Texans on this actually. So how hot is it where you
awesome.
are? Yeah. So tell us a bit about your journey as a writer.
Well, I did not start writing. In fact, did not write a word until I was around 47, and it was my reading buddy's birthday coming up in about 3 months, and we had moved, and so we were staying. She was really kind of my lifeline, and so I was like, I really wanted to do something special for her, and I had never written before. I'd always had stories in my head, but never written because I have terrible grammar. And I was like, you know what? Jennifer doesn't care if I have terrible grammar. She will just, I'm going to move my phone so I can see it better with the questions. She doesn't care. She doesn't care if I've got bad grammar. I'm just going to write this story. It'll be really special. She'll love it. And I started writing and quickly wrote myself in a corner because I didn't know what I was doing. And so then I told her I was going to write you a birthday. I had 3 months. Like, how hard could it be? And but I told her
that was the timeline you set for yourself, was it?
Yeah,
I've got
3 months.
To get this done. Yeah.
Within probably 2 weeks, I'd written myself in a corner and didn't know how to get out of it. So I told her I was going to write you a book for your birthday, but I don't know how and everything. And so she said, nope, now you have to. So we sort of loosely talked about what would be a funny fish out of water story, which actually turned into my very first book, which was Running from a Rock Star. But it was one of those things where, I would write a little bit and then I'd put it away, and then I'd write a little bit and put it away. And then my computer crashed and I lost everything. I had about 30,000 words, I guess, and I lost everything.
Oh, no.
We couldn't retrieve it. And I was like, excuse me. I was like, well, I'm not an author anyway, And so I sort of let it go. And I turned 50, and I was with my family, and I said, I think the only thing I regret is in 50 years is not finishing that book. And they're like, well, you should do it. You should finish it. And I was like, no way, I'd have to start over, and I'm not doing that. And I don't know, a couple of months later, my youngest daughter came in and said, Mom, I found this flash drive in my car, and I think your book is on it. And it was 20,000 words of the 30-ish thousand that I had written. And I thought, you know what? It's now or never. If I don't do it now, I won't do it. And so I joined Romance Writers of America. I started going to meetings, and that was in January of that year. And I, in May, decided that I needed to go to the critique group that they offered. And, from January to May, I pretty much just talked about writing, as one does. And so then I went to the critique group, and I didn't know you were supposed to email your pages. I thought you were supposed to, pass them about. And so I printed off my 10 pages and passed them out to the people. And we're at this little restaurant in Texas that it's a chain, and it's called Panera Bread. They have great potato soup. And so they're reading my pages while I'm sitting there eating my potato soup, trying not to vomit because they're reading and I am so embarrassed. I don't know what I'm doing. I know I don't know what I'm doing. And one woman actually did throw the pages on the table and say, I don't know if I can do anything with this. And I'm like, oh, well, that's fine. And a couple of other ladies, though, said, no, wait, this is funny. I want to know what happens next. Like, there are problems for sure, but this is funny. I want to know what happens next. So they start talking amongst themselves about how the story could be better, what needed to happen. I had them in a room for 10 pages and they never interacted. So that was one thing. And so they're not even talking to me necessarily. They're talking to each other, and I'm furiously taking notes. And I leave and go home and I fix it. I fix it as well as I can according to what they said as far as like content and structure. I couldn't fix the grammar really yet, so that was okay. And I went back, and I really think they were more surprised that I came back after that critique than the fact that I had done anything. But the fact that I had come back showed them that I was serious. And I was really lucky that the women in that group were all, if not all published, most of them were published. And they really were, even though they were a little merciless at times, they really did believe in my story and believed in me. And so that was in May. And then from May until September, October, we went every 2 weeks, and they tore that story apart every 2 weeks. And it was mostly grammar stuff because I would
Yeah.
catch on to the storytelling part of it, like showing versus telling, and things like that, and I was a stand-up comic when I was younger, and so I know how to tell a story that you may not believe that now because I'm dragging this out, but I do know how to tell a story that moves along. I understand
Yeah.
pacing, and so I and then it was mostly the grammar stuff, like dialogue tags. And one week they got me for run-on sentences. So I went home and fixed those and came back the next time and they got me for sentence fragments. I did cry that time, but I waited till I got in the car because I just couldn't cry in front of them. And I was like, I'm never going to get this, but I just kept going back. There was something in knowing I didn't know and admitting I didn't know what I was doing and being open to them teaching me. And so all summer, May to September, or October, into October, we did this. And then in November, I won my first Romance Writers of America contest with that book. Well, with the first 10 pages of that book. And
Yeah.
they wanted it was a publisher, a small publisher. They wanted the book. And thankfully, I did not have the book finished, at all. And I had more than 10 pages, but I didn't have it finished. And I just said, well, I'm just not quite ready to show you the whole thing. I'll let you know. And they really wanted it. And, but thankfully I didn't have it finished because I would have given them that book and it would have been a mistake because I ended up self-publishing that book and it was the beginning of my career. And, so yeah, that's how I got started. And it was painful and
Yeah.
continues to be painful at times. But yeah, it was worth it. It was worth it.
Brilliant. So you mentioned that all your books at the moment are self-published. Are they all self-published,
They
or
are
have you
all.
got books that have been also published? And was that an active decision you made,
Yes.
or was it an accident? Okay. And
No,
how's
it
that?
was an active decision. Well, and when I started, of course, I was thinking the publishing deal, that's what I wanted, as we all do, or most of us. But about a year or so into the process of writing this book, because it did take me several years to write it and write it well. Um, I um, through my Romance Writers of America, met a very successful romance author named Roxanne St. Clair. She came and spoke at one of our RWA meetings and or like conferences, and we were talking, and she was telling us that she had just turned down and walked away from her traditionally published contract. And she had been traditionally published for years, very successful, making, good money. But it was a six-figure contract that she had walked away from because they refused to remove this one small part of the contract that she knew they had removed for other people. They wouldn't remove it for her. And so
Yeah.
she walked away. And we met her 9 months after she had walked away from that six-figure contract. And she had made more than six figures publishing on her own with that
Right.
book
Okay.
in 9 months. And so I was like, and just, of course, she was somewhat, uh, I don't want to say bitter because she wasn't bitter. She was just disillusioned with the traditionally published world. And I just was thinking, you know what? If we're gonna only get, I was co-writing actually a book at the time with one of my critique partners that was kind of a small holiday, clean and wholesome,
Hmm.
rom-com kind of book. And I was telling my critique partner, I was like, if we're only gonna make $2.75 with this book, I want my $2. If we'll have to pay Amazon something, but I don't want to give away because we knew we were going to traditionally publish it with her publisher for 99 cents. I mean, that was the plan.
Right.
Sell it for 99 cents. And it just didn't make sense. So we decided to to self-publish that book. And, we put it out and we're like, okay, who's going to buy our book? And of course, no one does except for a few
Yeah.
friends and family. And most of the time, your friend, and I will tell your audience this, your friends and family will not always buy your book. And you just need to be okay with that because they're not your audience. They love you and they want you to succeed, but they're not your audience. And um and we can talk about this later, but their purchases of your book could actually hurt your book. And we'll talk
Yeah.
about that later. But anyway, so that started me on this quest of how do you get your book seen
Yeah.
in this ocean of books? Yours is just a little drop of water. And a friend of mine told me that I should listen to the Sell More Books podcast. Um,
Okay. Yep.
it's with Brian
Really good
Cohen,
one.
and at the time, he had a co-host with him, and so I started listening, and they kept talking about the SPP guys, the self-publishing podcast guys, and it was these three
Yes.
guys, very irreverent, very fun, but they were doing. This was back in 2015 into 2016. And they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff, writing a book from conception to publication in a month. And at the time, that and showing it, having, I think they used Periscope or something, and the whole process was shown. Um, and I mean, they just were doing a lot of things that were very innovative, and they were iterating on everything they were doing. But in listening to their podcast, I heard them talking about a conference they were having in May of 2016 called the Smarter Artist Summit, and in Austin, Texas, which is about two and a
Okay.
half hours from me. And I told my husband, I think I should go to this. And it was $500, but we had lived in Austin, so I had friends I could stay with and stuff. And he was like, "That's great. Like, how are we going to pay for $500 for a ticket?" And when I didn't have a book out or anything, and I mean, he wasn't saying I couldn't go. He was just saying, "How are we going to do that?" We had two kids
Yeah.
in college, the whole bit. And I was like, I got to think about it. I was like, you know what? I should wait. I should wait until I get a book out and then I'll go. And then it was Christmas, like that all happened in December. And so we had Christmas. we were out of town. We came home. I checked my emails, and I had an email from the Smarter Artist uh, conference saying that a woman named Julia Kent was going to be one of the speakers. And Julia is a romantic comedy writer as well. I mean, she writes romance, but they're rom-coms. And I had never met Julia, but I felt like this was my sign from God that I was supposed to go. So I returned all my Christmas gifts, and while we were gone, I got a mileage check that I had forgotten about, and I paid for my ticket to the Smarter Artist Summit, and that was the best $500 I've ever spent in my whole life
Wow. What
because
was so good about it?
it was amazing. First of all, it was just an amazing conference. It was small. I met
Yeah.
most of the friends I have today in this business, my really good friends that I can trust and that I feel like are on my side and I'm on their side, I met at that conference. And they weren't,
Mm.
I can only think of one, maybe two that write romance. The rest of them, but we were all in this together kind of thing. And when I went to the conference, my plan was to put out my first book, um, not the co-written book, but my book, Running from a Rock Star, out in that summer of 16.
Yep.
But in talking to Julia, I emailed her again, never had met her, but I emailed her and said, "Hey, I write romantic comedy. Can I please buy you a coffee? If you've got time, I'd love to speak, just pick your brain for a minute." And she was so gracious. She said, "Absolutely." So we talked, and she really recommended I wait to put out that book till I had she and one of the uh, leaders of the conference both happened to be sitting there when we were talking, and they both said, "Yeah, you need to wait until you have 3 books." Well, I didn't have 3 books. I write really slowly. And so, but I did wait. And they also suggested I learn this business of self-publishing.
Yep.
And so I spent a year learning the business of self-publishing, listening to every podcast I could get my hands on, um, and taking all the free courses and free because we were really not we were broke. I mean, we really had no extra money for self-publishing because who knew if it was even gonna, I mean, it was just this thing
Yeah,
I
it's a bit
was
of a risk.
doing. And while my husband was supportive, I mean, reality is reality. And to the point where I sold plasma to pay for my edits for my book because that's how important I really felt like a professional editor was. Even
Yep.
though the book was pretty clean because my critique partners had been through it and stuff, I still felt like I needed an editor. So I sold edits. I got a professional cover, and then I gave myself time to build an email list before I put the book out, which I did.
Okay. Let's let's go back to the sort of your writing technique.
Yeah.
So because we'll come to those marketing bits in a bit, but so with your writing, you're all sort of your rom-coms mostly. Like in your first books, you're like the running from series.
hmm
What was what was your inspiration for like writing about brides on the run?
Well, they're all runaway brides, and there was no inspiration. I will tell you. I wrote the first book, and it's a wake up in Vegas married rom
Yeah.
com. She runs away back to Texas, and then as I'm and in that book though, I did write 2 other characters that another book could be about because I mean, if you read, that's kind of that standalone in a series sort of thing is what readers like. And my critique partners and I were talking about what the next book should be, and one of them said, "Well, I think Luann should be a runaway bride." And I was like,
Okay.
"Yeah, I love that idea, but Scarlett's kind of a runaway bride too." And we all went, "A runaway bride series," and that's how it was born. And so it was born after the first book was written, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so that's how it came to be.
Was it always romantic comedy you were going to write about? Do you think?
Yes, yeah, it was
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
romantic comedy. When we moved from Austin to Houston, um, my kids were in school,
Yeah.
and I had spent uh, think I was like 40, 44, 45 when we moved. And my kids, I had spent almost 20 years in Austin cultivating friendships and relationships with people. And they were the kind you want your whole life, those
Yeah.
just great, great friendships. And so we moved. My kids were upset, but they quickly made friends here. My husband had his work. I had a job, but I had no friends. I had no friends. And um, it was just really hard. I'm an extrovert, and it was super, super hard. And I was very sad for a while. And I picked up a Susan Elizabeth Phillips book, Nobody's Baby But Mine. And I was reading that, and I started laughing, and I heard this laughter and didn't realize it was coming from me. Like I had not laughed like that since we had moved to Houston. It
It's
was
amazing when books do that,
it
isn't it?
it
Because
is. It
with
it just
yeah,
transported me, but also transformed me. Like I was happy because I was reading this book.
yeah,
And this was before I had started writing. And I remember thinking, if I ever wrote a book, this is the kind of book I would want to write. And still no idea that I would ever write a book. Um,
yeah,
and so when I started writing, I knew this was the kind of book I was going to write. Yeah.
yeah.
It
Amazing.
fits my voice. Rom-coms fit my voice, or at the time, they fit my voice really well.
Yeah.
Um, I grew up in a small town. Uh, a lot of times people, I've had people say that could never happen, and I'm like, oh, but it has in one way or another. Small
Yeah.
towns, just quirky, weird things happen in small towns.
Yeah. It's quite good for stand up as well, isn't it? That
It
sort of
is.
small town idea. Yeah, because I do a bit of stand up as well, and
Yeah,
that idea of like talking about the minutiae of something that
yeah,
happens in somewhere that is a bit weird,
yeah.
then that is it's quite a cool way of
I
doing it.
know, and it's hard not to make small town characters caricatures,
Yes,
because
so hard.
honestly, in life, they are a bit of a caricature, but
Yeah.
so that's the
You're like, why is
trick.
there an old man walking around being racist? It's
Yeah,
because, well, there actually was an old man
there
walking around being
was. Yeah,
racist.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's why romantic comedies for me right now.
Yeah. I read before that you love Outlander, and
I
that my
do.
wife, yeah, we're obsessed with Outlander. We've watched the TV, not the book so
Oh,
much, but
I don't really watch the show, even though I love the show. I have watched it. I love who they cast as Jamie. I think
yeah,
they got that spot
my
on.
my wife's obsessed with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, we won't talk about that. But that are those the sort of characters you like? Where it's quite like clear what their sort of goals are, what they're aiming to do. Is that those sort of characters they have in Outlander? Is that similar to your characters? Do you think?
Oh, gosh, that's a hard question because I don't know that that's exactly. They're so different. I mean, I would like to think my characters have very clear goals, and I mean,
Yeah,
that's when you're telling a story, you want that to be the case.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, I would say that I try to bring. I do think about Jamie a lot, especially when I was first writing. Well, I think about him a lot, but I think about him a lot when I was first writing because his character is so compelling. I mean, he's vulnerable, but he's also very strong, and
yeah,
he's a victim in some ways, but he's also not.
yeah,
And so I do try to write really strong heroes like that who have this sort of softer underbelly that we can, relate to.
yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Are there any with the when you're trying to think of characters or even the way you write? Do you have any key influences that you kind of fall back on quite a lot, or are there any that have really inspired you in your
Um,
writing?
well, Susan Elizabeth Phillips,
Okay.
just her characters, the way she writes them,
Yeah.
they're just so real. Even though they are
Yeah.
crazy, they uh, they are so real. Um, so that's really, I think for me, that's one of the best. Lucy Score, I love her characters too.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Great. She's amazing, Lucy
yeah,
Score, isn't she?
Lucy is.
Yeah.
She's a friend of mine, and she's amazing. And but yeah, I mean, before I started writing, um, yeah, I would say those are the ones that
The
I
two main
think
ones.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, nice. So going back to what you said before about editing, so did you hire an external editor,
Yes.
and what was that process like?
I had been in or am in the 20 books to 50K group, but I got
Oh,
in it
yeah,
when there were only 4,000 people in it. And
yeah.
so
Just the people that don't know, that's like it's a big Facebook
yeah, it's a
community that
yeah,
that help people to write 20 books basically, and that the aim is that you can make money from having 20 books.
right, right.
Yeah,
But so when I was in that group, because it was smaller, I met some people in a I met this one woman in a promo that we did, which is how I built my newsletter. That's how
yeah.
it started. And she's an author, but she's also an editor. And so when I decided to get an external editor, I sent out sample pages to like about 5 editors. And all of them except for her tried to change my voice. So when you're writing rom-coms, and I would say even small town rom-coms or any kind of rom-com where you have um unique characters, I think you got to be real careful because with your editor, because you do not want them changing your voice. Like in dialogue, my characters do not speak in complete sentences, or they speak in run-on sentences, and people were trying to change that, and or change the wording of something, of something I said that's really kind of a colloquialism to my small towns. And I did not want those things changed. And so Serena was the only one who uh, did not change my voice.
So for people who haven't like written novels maybe
Hmm.
before, what's that editing process look like? How does that work?
So she does my copy line edits. I do have
Yeah,
someone who does a developmental edit now because I'm not no longer in the critique group. When I was in the critique group, I didn't feel like I needed a developmental editor because I had the critique group.
yeah.
And but so my entire process is I write the first draft, I send it to a developmental editor. They look at it. They tell me where the holes are, where the problems are, and send it back. Then I write it, rewrite it several times, a couple of times. And um, then once it's as good as I can get it, I send it, excuse me, I send it to my copy line editor,
Okay, and
Serena.
they're checking for like spelling and
Yes,
stuff
Serena
like that.
Clark, but she does a heavy copy line edit. And because she's been with me from the beginning and she knows my voice and she knows characters and she knows my audience, she will come back in and like as an example in my book Homecoming King, my developmental editor had said that there was a part in the Black moment that she didn't feel real comfortable with because the hero curses at the heroine, and or not at the heroine, but he uses a cuss word, a pretty strong curse word in their interaction. And she was like, that just feels aggressive for your books. That's what my developmental editor said. And I was like, well, you're a Kiwi. I mean, you're from New Zealand and you're real sweet and you don't understand this. It's a football book. He's a football player. You don't understand like football in Texas and all of this. And I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. So I left it in and then did the book, sent it to my developmental editor. I mean, my line editor, Serena. And Serena is also from Australia. And she said the exact same thing, not knowing that uh, Laverne had said that in the developmental edit. And again, I was like, you guys are just too sweet. You don't understand how real Texas men talk, all this stuff. Anyway, I
You guys
felt,
must swear pretty badly if you think an Australian thinks you're swearing
well,
too
it's New
much.
Zealand, New Zealand. But
Yeah, yeah.
she just felt like the way this hero, she was like, I'm afraid your audience will will miss the point of what he's saying which is showing this really vulnerable side of him because he is coming back at her with this swear word. And I was like, well, I'm going to leave it in. And I left it in until the last minute, and then I took it out. And I'm so glad I took it out because she was right. She was right. I mean, in looking at some of the comments and some of the um, that scene is really pivotal, and I
Yeah.
do think it would have lost something had I not left it out. So she does, grammar. She does, thank God, she does grammar. She does all of that, and but she also gives me kind of a heavy copy line edit with some developmental stuff that maybe not that I've missed, but that I've if she thinks I can go deeper, or if she thinks I've gone too deep and I don't need to go that deep, she tells me. I don't always take her advice, but a lot of times I do because she does know my writing and me and my audience so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And
cool.
then after that, I do a proofread. I have someone proofread it. So,
Right. So it's quite a lengthy process,
yeah,
I guess. So
yeah,
yeah, because a lot of people just have one editor.
yeah.
Um, which one's more important if someone's on a bit of a budget, they're just starting out?
Copy line.
Copy line. Yeah, just to
Hmm.
make sure the grammar and everything's
Hmm.
in there and making
Hmm.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. For me, that would be it because you can, like, I did not use a proofreader the first few books because I had arc readers or and I still rely heavily on arc readers because um I feel like they catch a lot of things, that because I mean you can have a proofreader and they're still going to miss stuff. I mean it's hard.
Yeah.
But if I only had a certain amount of money, I would definitely try to do the copy line edit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because with the ARC stuff, the ARC editors, you readers, so you can usually get them for free if you can like get the
Correct.
right contacts and you
Correct.
can build that up. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially most of my books are non-fiction, so I find it relatively easy to get it
Yeah.
because there's loads of people interested in topics. But
Correct.
there's loads of people who are happy to get free books who just love reading,
Right.
just want to get stuff.
Right.
Yeah, a place like Free Booksy, really good place to get that sort of
Right.
thing.
Right.
Obviously, because your books are completely self-published, what you have to do your own marketing and all that.
Yeah.
So, have there any been particularly good marketing strategies that have worked for you?
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, building my newsletter before I
Yes.
published was
Yeah, let's talk about that.
probably looking back the best thing I ever did. And I did that through a promotion that in the 20 books to 50K group, someone was doing a preview promo, which was just the first some few chapters. I did 3 chapters. One person did 6 chapters of their book. I did 3 chapters because I wanted it to end on a hook.
Yeah.
Um, so in that promotion, we did not make them sign up before they got the book. They read the book, they read the preview, then decided if they wanted to sign up. And I think for me that was a really good option because I only got people who wanted to be on my list. And I got 81 people or something like that. And I was thrilled because I had zero. And so 80 people, I'm like, this is amazing. But then I was doing some PA work for another romance author who was a pretty big name. And she was doing a full book promo with a bunch of authors. And she asked me if I wanted to put in my preview. And I was like, well, it's just a preview. And she said, no, that's fine. So, and on there it clearly says it's a preview. It's on the cover and everything. It clearly said it was a preview. But those people did have to uh, give their email address before they got the preview. But
Yeah.
most of the authors in that promo wrote pretty similarly to me. Maybe not complete romantic comedy, but lighter romance and stuff. And so I had 1,200 people on my email list before my first book came out. So
Brilliant.
that all happened about 6 weeks before the book came out. And I immediately sent them an email after I got them on and said, hey, this is me. Good to, so glad to meet you. Here's something hilarious that's happened to me. And it was this crazy story about how I had thought I had gained a bunch of weight in just like a few days because I had accidentally put on my teenage daughter's pants that were just like my pants. And I got them buttoned, God knows how, but and they were 5 sizes too small, but I got them buttoned. But I like spent the entire evening thinking, what have I done? Like, I just wore these pants. What has happened to me? And realized that they were my daughter's later because I didn't have on my reading glasses when I got dressed. And anyway, so it was a very crazy story, very funny. And but I wanted them to understand this is what you're getting from me. If you don't
Yeah.
like this, then you can go. It's totally fine. Um,
But so how do you use your newsletter now? Do you have particular types of content that you like to push out, or are there any ways you use it to make money
on my newsletter.
apart from apart from like just the selling books?
No, it's just my books. I
Yeah.
do offer, like, from the beginning, I did newsletter swaps because I had this 1,200 person newsletter. That was enough for people to be willing to swap with me.
So
Um,
that's other authors promoting their
yes,
books who are like
yes.
similar sort of topics.
I
Yeah.
would put their book in my newsletter. They would put my book in their newsletter.
Yeah.
And so when the book launched, I had newsletter swaps set up for like 9 days after the book launched.
Okay.
And but I don't.
Did you use a particular service for that, or was it just you did it with people you know?
I use people. Well, a lot of them were in that 20 books to 50K group because I
Okay.
just
So it
put
sounds
out
like
like,
a good
hey,
resource.
yeah, and then some other people that I had met. That is one of the things also about waiting a year to publish. I had a chance to really meet and get to know some people in this industry and in my genres, in my genre, and it really paid off in the end. Um,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so when I send out a newsletter, it's mostly slice of life stuff, ways I've embarrassed myself in public. It was hard during COVID because I couldn't go out and embarrass myself in public. So then it became a lot of, hey, how we doing? Are we hanging in there? How much, um, dry shampoo have you used this week? And, stuff like that. And then, but every time I send, and I don't, my emails are not by my books. They're just not. I always have my books in my emails. I have the links to my books, my audiobooks. Um,
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's
all
just a
that.
bit of a you
It,
just tell them what you're up to, like
yeah, I
give
tell
them
them
a bit
what
of
I'm up
insight into your
to. I
life.
have
Yeah.
the books that from other authors, and I sell books every time I send out a newsletter. Every time.
Wow.
And my
And do
newsletter now is I just did a culling. It was around 20,000. Now it's around 17,000 because I switched and I had some duplicates and then I got rid of a few people that were just not, I
yeah,
was getting emails back from them saying they weren't
still really
available.
good though.
Yeah. So, and then
Yeah.
I've had some unsubscribe, which is fine with me. I do not worry about unsubscribes because I don't, if
Yeah.
you're not going to carry your weight on my email list by buying my books and you don't want to be there, then I don't want to pay for you. So
Yeah. Fine.
I give them a place to follow me, Amazon, Goodreads, BookBub, so if when I have a new book. But if you're not a newsletter person, so fine. So fine.
Yep.
Just
Fine.
move along. Yeah.
And were there any other marketing tips that you've used to help promote your books? Like, for example, have you used any ads or like any sort of PR or anything like that?
I've done in the beginning, because I'd heard book blogs were good. I've done that twice. I've done it twice.
Yep.
Those are hard because you can't measure those. Like, they're very difficult to measure. Um,
Which ones is that? Sorry.
I did. Which one did I do? Ooh, it's been several years. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name.
That's right. We'll get it that about.
Yeah. Um, but they're hard to measure because you don't know how many sales are coming from that place.
Yep.
I do in the first year I did Amazon ads and
Yes.
they were super successful for me. Excuse me, allergies are terrible here. Um, they were really successful for me and I did them from the beginning. Like,
Yep.
I realized that my book had some momentum uh, in the beginning. It
Yep.
launched, like, that first book launched to 1050 in the store uh, on the first day, and that's because of my newsletter and the newsletter swaps I was doing. But because I realized it had some momentum, I started doing some very low cost AMS ads at the time. They were called AMS ads at the time, and didn't tell my husband because I was like,
You just
oh
get a credit
gosh,
card bill
no.
for five
I was
hundred
like,
dollars.
no,
Yeah.
it was, I think I spent $130 and I had to tell him, at the end of the month, I spent $130. And he said, well, how much did you make? And I said, well, I think it was $1,600 or something. And he said,
Oh wow,
that's a
it's like
pretty,
an 8%
yeah,
ACOS.
he was like, that's a pretty good return on investment. I think we can find that for another 2 months because again, you don't get paid for 2 months. So
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was tricky. Um, but I just, so they worked really well. And then after the first year, something changed and I could not get them to work. But then I
Okay,
started doing Facebook ads, and Facebook ads changed the game for me.
really? Wow. Okay.
In So with the same number of books, because I don't release very fast. Like I released my first book in April of 2017 and the second book in the first in November of 2017, and then didn't release another book until like October of 18. So it was a whole year. So with the same number of books in a shorter period of time, in 6 months I made the same thing with Facebook ads that I had made in a whole year of or 6 months of AMS ads. So
Right.
Facebook ads just changed the game for me. And after that, it was amazing. They are more difficult now, but at the time, they were amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I found Amazon ads great because you can obviously track them so easily and see
Yes.
when people have bought.
Yes.
That's the only thing with doing Facebook ads is it's hard to see when people have bought. You can see
Right.
they clicked, but
Right.
not the
And
actual
and
payments.
I'm not a huge data person. Like that's
Yeah.
probably the understatement of the year. Um, but And so for a long time, I was like, am I making more than I'm spending? Yes. Is the ad still performing? Are the numbers still relatively the same? Yes. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
good. And then I thought, oh, I've got to learn to track. I've got to learn to track. And so I tried doing that, and it was so confusing. And I was like, no. Am I making more than I'm spending? Yes, that's all that matters. Because I
So
don't run like a ton at a time, so I
yeah.
know which ones are doing well and which ones aren't.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, if you're making more than you're spending, then that's good
That's
enough
kind
for
of
most
all that
people.
matters to me. I mean, I know there are
Yeah.
people that are more granular, but um, that's not me, and
Mm,
it's not what I enjoy. And I have learned in this business that you have to kind of let go of a few things. And I used to worry about like what that made me sound like or how that made me look. Like I was just flying by the seat of my pants. Well, I was doing okay flying by the seat of my pants, and I just had to be okay with that. Yeah.
yeah. With Amazon ads, that's one of the things that a lot of authors find tricky is like getting those ads to work. It's why using some tools can be great. Like the publishing performance tool works
Yeah.
really well for like managing those ads. It's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah. Well, and
Um,
I'm also in Kindle Unlimited, and so it's harder with Amazon ads if you're in Kindle
yes.
Unlimited because you can't see. Well, you can now, but it's delay. I mean, it's just trickier. So, and especially
Yeah.
back then, you couldn't see page reads like you can
You
see
can
them
now
now.
in your
You can
ads.
now,
So
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
I still have a real hard time making those work. I think it's because of the categories I'm in. Romance is really hot. Romantic comedy is very hot.
yeah,
What I have to pay to be seen is pretty high, and I only have 7 books.
yeah,
I don't have the catalog to carry that large um, sum.
yeah,
In the beginning.
yeah. Of course.
Yeah,
Great. So apart from your books, you've also got your podcast.
I
Wish I'd
do.
known then for writers. Yeah.
Yes.
So this is amazing. So I've listened to loads of this,
Okay.
and it's it's a really great resource, especially for fiction writers, but for
Yeah.
people who are for getting into like writing and some tips and tricks, a bit like
Right.
this really,
Right.
but more aimed specifically at fiction writers and
Right.
less like about the business side of it.
Hmm.
So what's tell me yeah tell me about that because why did you start it? How's it going?
Well, my co-host Sarah Rosette, she
Yeah,
writes historical fiction. So I met her at that Smarter Artist Summit in 2016.
right.
And we went to Austin, but it turns out she lived 10 minutes from me. here in Houston. So, and then another friend of ours we met there, and we lived in this little 10-minute triangle. So it was
Yeah.
amazing. But Sarah and I from the beginning, we both had listened to a ton of podcasts to
Yeah.
learn about indie publishing. I mean, that was our education. And Sarah had been traditionally published, but then left traditional publishing and went to indie publishing. And we talked about a podcast forever. And then in 2019, we really seriously started talking about it. And we were like, we really want to do this. We should really do this. And so we did. And we got some really great advice from someone named Becca Syme. I don't know if you're familiar with
Yes.
her. Yes.
I'm speaking to her in a few
Yeah.
weeks.
Oh, you'll love her. And so Becca is brilliant, and she has her own Better Faster Academy and um, YouTube page and all of that. And so we came up with like a name that was the Indie Author Podcast. And she was like, no, like you need something better. So that's when we came up with Wish I'd Known Them for Writers. Something that really talked about what we were going to do. And so we recorded quite a few episodes before we started, and our first episode aired in January of 2020.
Right.
Little did we know, what was going to happen. And thank God we had that podcast because it really carried me in particular through COVID because I am an extrovert and it was so difficult for me to not be around people. Uh, but we say it's our love letter to this industry because we learned so much from podcasting we want to give back. And
Yeah.
I would disagree a little bit in that it's not about the business side. I think it is there are business things about our podcast that have really helped. And we ask every guest the same questions pretty much unless they're in a completely different field, but we ask them what they wish they'd known about writing, what they wish they'd known about marketing, what
Yeah.
they've done that they thought would work and didn't work, and but has and vice versa, and what changes in their thinking and stuff. And then we always ask them something specific to them, if they're nonfiction author, then we ask them about nonfiction stuff and vice versa. Um, but yeah, so we've had Becca on several times. In fact, we call it a drinking game anytime we mention Becca or the strengths. She does the Clifton strengths. Um, Everybody takes a drink, and so we've had her on. All her episodes are amazing. Claire Taylor, who does something for the Enneagram writing using the Enneagram for authors. She's amazing. And yeah,
Yeah.
we really love it. It's going well. We have 248 episodes. So there's kind of something for everyone. We've been doing it since 2020 and
Yeah.
don't have any intention of stopping right now. So yeah, it's a lot of work,
Who've
but
been
we love it.
who have been your favorite guests so far?
There've been several. I love like Lucy's been on, Lucy
Yeah.
Score. Melanie Harlow has been that's episode 209. Steph Green, recently we had her on. She was awesome. And she was talking about skeleton drafting. We just have
Okay.
and like I said, anything with Becca, anything with Claire. Um, yeah, we've just had some really great guests and love it.
If there was someone who's like just about to start listening to your podcast, what would be your best episode to recommend to get them to start
Uh,
understanding what it's about?
Probably the first episode because we really do talk, just explain what it's going to be about. But
Okay.
episode 26 is really good. We call it the mega episode because it's about launching and it's about everything both of us have done to kind of set us up for success. Sarah is super successful, super, super
Right.
successful. And she's the person, like she did Kickstarter before anybody, well, not before anybody, but she was one of the first ones to do Kickstarter. Did great. Like she always does things first, and I'm like, okay, I'll try now. And I am not the innovative one. She is, and so our personalities are very different. So if I'm too much for some people, Sarah's just right for them. It's
Right.
yeah.
Great. That's amazing. What's your plans for the podcast? Have you got anything coming up?
Um, we have supporters for our podcast. If you want to support, you can support us, and we're doing some writing sprints. We're trying that to build. We have a Facebook page. We just are doing more of the same, just finding interesting, cool people to talk to, and finding out what they wish they'd known when they started out, and what they would do different, and if they would do anything different. One of my favorite
Yeah.
questions, it's the last question we ask everybody, is what have you done to set yourself up for success? And I just feel like that's such a great question because um, there's always something, and it's usually not earth shattering. It's not it's just either being consistent or being positive or, being around the right people or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
Mhm.
So obviously you think networking is quite important
Oh,
for writers.
the,
Is
I think it's the number one thing.
right,
For
okay.
me, it's meant the difference between success and failure.
Really? So
And
that would be the answer to your question if you were asked
yeah.
that yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think it is. We've asked each other, Sarah and I have sort of interviewed each other, and I've used that before because it's just been so vitally important to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the best ways for people to do some networking? Because I know a lot of authors especially are quite like introverted. They like
Yes,
sitting
they
in their
are.
rooms typing and
Yeah.
like not conferences aren't necessarily for everyone.
Yes.
So have you found that sort of
Well,
network?
like groups are always good, like the 20 Books group. That's such a
Yeah.
huge group. But there are other like there's so many groups Facebook groups that are um genre specific or with and if you don't find one or it's too big or whatever, start your own. I mean, like,
Yep.
how hard is that? I remember Brian Cohen talking about how he in the he did a lot of networking because he would volunteer to put these anthologies together for authors and stuff like that. And I remember thinking that is so smart. Like, he's the one wanting to, willing to do the work because other authors want to do stuff, they just don't want to do the work. So if you're willing to do
Yeah.
the work and let's say put a Facebook group together and moderate it or whatever, people will come. And so that's a good way. I do think conferences are a good way, and I do think it's important to push those limits of what you think you can do because I'm telling you, everyone I've ever talked to that was like, I didn't want to come and I was really nervous, go and they meet some people and they're so happy they went because
Yeah.
the fact is, I mean, like, we compare our insides to other people's outsides, and that's not a fair comparison because everybody's faking it. I mean, everybody is faking it. And so everybody's got that insecurity. Everybody is worried that somebody won't like them or think they're weird or think they look weird. And if you just know that, then it's a lot easier to meet people.
What are some of the favorite conferences you've been to? I mean,
Uh,
I hear a lot
my,
about the 20 books, which is now
yeah,
the Author Nation one, but
yeah. 20 Books was one that I went to in the beginning. Right, currently one of my favorites is Inkers Con in
yes, great.
Dallas. Alessandra Torre, she has a group, and that's a great group to get involved with too, is Inkers on Facebook. Um, and it's Inkers, Inkers,
Yeah.
if you can't understand my
Yeah, we'll pop a link to it in the show
yeah,
notes.
thanks. But Inkers Con is one of the best. It's smaller, about 200 people.
Yeah.
Super informative. They have different tracks, for different, whatever you're looking for or whatever level you're at. There's tons of opportunity for networking and meeting people and just sitting and having conversations. And, and here's the deal, when you're networking, you don't have to say anything. If you get in a group and people are talking, just sit there and listen.
Yeah.
Like, that's the best way to soak in information. So,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, that's one and Nink is always great. Novelist Inc. There is a threshold for earning to get into that one, but it's not horrible. I mean, and it's on their website.
Yeah.
Um, this year I'm doing the Better Faster Academy. Sarah and I are speaking there in October, and then I will be at Author Nation doing a panel for Wish I'd Known Then.
Great.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I'll see you there.
yeah,
I'm looking forward to that trip.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Quite a big one for us to come over to America, go to Las Vegas and stuff.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I
I'm
was gonna
excited
say,
about
yeah.
that one. So just before we come to end, are there any like for writers that are just starting out, like especially if they're in the rom-coms, like your romance comedy, sorry,
Hmm.
your sort of area? Have you got any tips for them, like what they should, any things they should really focus on just to make sure they're building their brands, getting their book right in the first place?
Yeah, I do author consulting, and
Okay,
one of my favorite things to do is branding. I love branding. Branding is the promise you're making your reader. So if everything from your book cover, your title, your content, your Amazon page, if that does not um, meet the promise that you're making your reader in whatever genre you're saying you're writing in, then you need to re-examine that. So,
yeah,
and the best one of the best ways to do that is to uh, look at your comp authors, authors that write what you write, and see what their titles are, what their um, covers look like, what their blurbs look like, what their first, their look inside looks like in their books. And yours needs to be similar. Like
yeah,
I am not saying copy. I am saying it needs to look similar. I mean, similar but different. You can be in it. I mean, one of the worst things anybody can say to me, a new author, is, "Well, my book's not like anything you've ever read." And I just want to go, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," because that book's not going to sell. I'm sorry.
yeah,
It's probably not going to sell because readers, there is something called genre expectation. And if you're writing genre fiction, genre expectation. But even if you're writing nonfiction, I mean, there is a certain expectation for the reader experience, and they want that. If it's outside of that experience for them, they're uncomfortable and they will not continue reading, or they won't even pick it up, because
yeah.
there is a certain feeling, especially with genre readers. There is a certain feeling, emotion, um, experience that they want, and if they don't get that, they will move on to someone else who will give them that experience.
Brilliant. That's really good advice.
Thank you.
Like don't try to be too out there at
Yep.
first. Maybe like just stick to the genre that you're trying to do.
Right.
Learn from the best.
Yep.
Like it's basically just uh, imitate before innovate.
Yes,
That sort of
yes,
idea. Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah,
And then I think the other thing I would say is, you know, leaving the day job and writing full time is the goal. It's the dream. Everybody has the dream. But I have learned, in doing this for a long time, that maybe that shouldn't be the dream. Some of us need to be around people. And I was fortunate. I was able to leave my job after my second book. And and it was great in the beginning, but it's hard. And you have to know yourself. You have to
hmm
know how much how much input you need from the outside world to be able to be creative and functional in your writing world. And for me, I really need more input than just me in a room by myself. And unfortunately, now I'm unemployable, I think, because I've worked for myself for so long. It would be hard, but I mean, I'm not opposed to going back to a job if the right job came along. I'm not just going to take a job if the right job came along, because, and it's not anything but, I have found that having outside influence, and it doesn't have to be a job, it can be volunteering, it can be whatever, but that idea of, oh, I just want to be with my computer in my room alone with my blanket and write it. Yeah. Sometimes that's a dream, but it's not a realistic dream, because and so just adjusting your expectations. Like, you can
yeah,
still be super successful and super um fulfilled while working a job and writing. And
yeah.
so I just want to maybe temper expectation.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for coming today. So, if people want to keep in touch with you, like follow
Yep.
you around,
Yeah.
where's the best place to do that?
My website, www.jamialbright.com. If you want to, if you're interested in any consultant help. And I do everything from branding to I don't do grammar. And I or anything like that. That would be just unethical. And but just anything as far as like launching help or anything like that, I can help you. And you can find me at
Brilliant.
jamialbright.com/contact. And then the
And your
podcast is,
podcast,
yeah,
yeah, sorry. I'll say the podcast is Wish I'd Known Then for
yes,
writers, which is
yes,
wish I'd known that for writers.com.
yes,
But also you can just search that on
yes,
all of the main ones.
yes, yes.
Brilliant. Well,
Yeah,
thank you so much for coming. I really
yeah,
appreciate your time today.
sure.
Just before we go, so what's the one book that you're reading at the moment that you think maybe everyone should read?
Well, I'm not reading it at the moment, but it's queued up in my Audible thing to re-listen to. It is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. It is one of my very favorite writing books. And she taught. I mean, she just it's Big Magic. Basically writing through fear. It's I don't remember the subtitle, but it is one of the best books on creativity and writing that I have ever read, and I read it about once a year or reread it about
Brilliant.
once a year because it's so good.
Oh, great. I think that's nice to have a sort of the less famous book from a famous author
Yes,
as the recommendation. I really like
yes.
that. So thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Yeah,
Well, it was great to speak to you. I really love your podcast, so please keep going.
thank
I
you.
find it really inspirational and
Thank
it's really good listen. So everyone should subscribe to that now. But
Thank
hopefully I'll see you at Author Nation. And yeah, thanks.
Sure, no
All
problem.
right, speak soon. Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance Podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1. Thank you so much for tuning into the Publishing Performance Podcast. I really hope you found today's episode inspiring. I love chatting to authors, writers, and people in the publishing world. Now, just before we wrap up, let me tell you about Publishing Performance, the #1 platform for authors who want to increase Amazon book sales, but are not really sure where to start. Now, this show is all about helping you to sell more books. And if you're looking to boost your publishing game and to maximize your book's potential on Amazon, then Publishing Performance is designed to help authors just like you to grow your readership and to reach a much wider audience. Now, I know that Amazon ads can be slightly complicated, which is why Publishing Performance is like having a personalized ad account manager to create your ad campaigns, to choose your best keywords, and to make adjustments in real time. Now, if you're investing in ads, you really want to make sure that your investment is being used effectively, and Publishing Performance does just that. It aims to make your budget go further, improve your organic rank, and target keywords more effectively. Just go to publishingperformance.com to get started with Amazon ads for just $1.